Let's see. Share screen.
It's my freshman year. Freshman year, I had to work the side of any it's where home.
Let's see here.
That's why I stopped buying shoes for a while. Like, I was like, what if you
All right.
So I can't decide if I want really small feet or just.
There we go.
Yeah.
Why is this one right here? You really need to be right here. There we go. That's a better place to be. Huh. Why is that happening? That's so weird. Oops. Duplicate. Keep changes. There we go. That's what we wanted. Oh no. And also all right, it is 6-ish, so we're gonna get started. Today is going to be a couple of different things. So we are going to go through the book chapter and the lecture provided by your book authors on prisons and jails, because I think that, I mean, all of you read it and probably noticed some things as you were reading it that seemed sort of arbitrary or interesting or subjective in a lot of ways. And so we're going to kind of go through what the book provides on prison and jails from a critical lens, and then we're going to talk about the Davis reading and mass incarceration. And then so corrections folks can be a little flaky sometimes. They were initially, yeah, I sure hope so. Thank you for asking. Let's make sure. Are we still recording? Yeah. Hey, what's going on here? Yes, but my screen sharing is paused and I don't know why that's happening. How do I make it not do that? Why are you paused? What's going on? All right, we're just gonna stop. Oh, okay, we're gonna stop. We're gonna try again. Okay, yeah, sure, cool. And we should be recording, in which case I'm gonna have to block out the first, several minutes of me whispering the word fuck repeatedly at the computer while it was not working. So I don't get in trouble. You are recording. All right, cool. So we're gonna do that, and then so a couple of folks that work in corrections that we're gonna try to come today that weren't able to But I do have, and then I had 3 folks that are formerly incarcerated that are going to come, and only one of them is going to be here. So we will have a speaker, former employee of mine named Bobby Jackson, who will show up at some point and will be here for Q&A for the second half of class. So we're probably not going to go through the actual lecture for the Inmates World chapter because first of all of you read it. Second of all, it's all very subjective based on kind of the view of the authors, neither of whom have been incarcerated. And third, we will have Bobby here and you can ask him whatever you would like about what it's like to be incarcerated. Yeah. So your book, Prisons and Jails, Structures and Function. So they talked a lot about a decline in correctional populations. This is relatively new data, and we're going to look at some of that data with the second part of the lecture. Starting about 10 years ago, we started to see a bit of a decline. Not to pre-mass incarceration levels, but kind of a slow decline. And the reason for that is a couple of things. Well, we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about correctional agencies as organizations, what it looks like from an organizational level, what it actually means to work for a correction system. We're talking about the prison system, and we're going to talk about technology. So that's kind of our general overview. And then second half, we'll talk about Oregon-specific things, the Davis reading, and mass incarceration. So difference between jail and prison. Basically, one is for long-term, the other is for short-term. Jail is usually county or municipal. That's typically where people are held while they're waiting trial. There are a few exceptions. Sometimes if they're, if somebody's sent to the state hospital for treatment before they go to trial, like Judge Waller talked about last week, or if somebody is exceptionally violent or something, but most of our jails have some sort of maximum security floor, or at least a few cells to hold those individuals. And so people don't actually end up in the state prison until after their sentencing. The other thing that can happen, at least in Oregon, anything over than a year, you go to the prison. Anything less than a year, you stay at the county jail. And that's because of our sentencing grid, which we'll talk about in a few weeks. So prisons can be state or federal. Jails are typically county or municipal. So kind of local versus larger systems. This is a graph from your book looking at changes in incarceration. So again, we see kind of a slight decrease here between 06 and 16. Where it is important to be critical is that, okay, why only 2006 to 2016? So obviously 10 years, easy to collect data for 10 years and keep that a really nice objective number. The things that you always want to question when you see graphs, though, is like, okay, what was happening before that? What was happening after that? And as we zoom out, you'll see kind of this massive spike and then this tiny, tiny little dip in that 10 years. And so we always want to look at the big picture type data. If this trend continues, that's promising, assuming that, we're seeing a decrease for good reasons. So currently, we have a little over 1.5 million people in state and federal prisons. According to your book, it was increasing annually until 2009. And then started declining. As of 2016, there were 2,750 on death row, which I don't think it shows up there, but fun fact, those of you who are doing the death penalty capital punishment for your project, I'm sure you'll talk about that. And it's a really, really big field. So a little under 500,000 people in the United States are employed as correctional officers, just as officers, not including all the administrators, the behavioral health staff, the healthcare staff, all of that stuff. Correctional nurses, there's a huge career opportunity there. There's a huge career opportunity for mental health, all different things. So a few reasons why there might be a slight decline. We have seen a lot of jurisdictions start releasing folks with nonviolent offenses, particularly drug offenses. We saw a lot of this during COVID. So I imagine that when we do get data from the last 3 years, we're going to see a much larger spike decrease in incarcerated individuals because a lot of jails were forced to let people out because of the COVID issues. Oregon Department of Corrections had some serious issues with COVID, several huge outbreaks right at the beginning of the pandemic, lots of issues around whether or not the inmates were allowed to wear masks, high death rates, all of that kind of stuff. And so the governor actually started releasing a lot of folks early who had nonviolent offenses. Two of the guys that worked for me, one of whom is going to be here tonight, are some of those individuals because of the nature of their offense and the way that they conducted themselves while incarcerated and the risk of having too many people in too small of a space. Another reason is trying to save costs. Incarceration is expensive. Although the data on incarceration costs can be a little bit misleading. So you'll see a lot of different numbers cited. Some people will say, oh, it's $800 a day or this many dollars per year. What they don't take into account is where that money comes from. So it's not necessarily taxpayer dollars that are paying for it. In some jurisdictions, inmates actually receive a bill for their incarceration. In some jurisdictions, inmate labor is used to pay for the incarceration itself. There are all kinds of different funding streams for keeping people incarcerated. So keep that in mind when you see those numbers, that it's not just purely tax dollars that's going to incarceration. There are lots of different funding streams. Fall in incarceration rates. So people are just getting incarcerated less often. We've seen a decrease in crime overall since 2008. We've seen a decrease in both violent and non-violent crime. And we have seen a lot of reforms with the bail system. I know we talked about this before, where people are ending up in jail less often due to no longer having to pay their way out of it, right? So if we get rid of monetized bail and give people other types of bail alternatives, like behavior alternatives, show up and do community service, show up and check in for, with a PO, all those kinds of things, people are less likely to end up in jail based on whether or not they can pay for it. So all sorts of different reasons why we're seeing that decrease. Mass incarceration, your book's version. So the definition here that they give is a term generally referring to what is perceived as the United States' disproportionately high rates of imprisonment of young African-American men. Some believe it deters crime and incapacitates offenders, while others say it weakens poor families and keeps them socially marginalized. So let's talk about that. What is perceived as the United States' disproportionately high rates of imprisonment? Here are imprisonments by country. Who's at the top? And keep in mind, this is per 100,000. This is a rate, not a raw number. So this is not just the number of incarcerated people. This is the number per 100,000, so proportion of our population. Not to talk shit on these other countries, but let's look and see who we are considered similar to in terms of numbers. How's it going? You can sit wherever you would like and listen to me talk for an hour. So, yeah. When was the last time you were in a classroom?
Probably at OSB.
Okay.
In their classroom.
Okay. Well, guys, this is Bobby. Take a deep breath, sit where you like. So, no, you're fine. You're fine. I'm glad that you made it. So, who are we similar to? And are these countries that we would like to be similar to in terms of our incarceration rates? Yeah, it's a little sketchy, right? Note the gender differences. That's kind of a universal across the world, higher in some areas than others. Some countries don't have data, so you'll see 0, for instance. Obviously, we know that out of the 57,337 people, not all of them are non-binary, so we clearly just don't have gender data there. But let's go down and look at other, what are some countries that you think we are similar to in terms of culture and politics, etc.? All right, let's look up Canada and the UK. Canada, 104. United Kingdom, oops, what do they call it these days? Britain? I don't even know. Is this before or after Brexit? Nope, not the Virgin Islands. England, who knows? Do they have data on here? They may or may not. La 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 la. I'm not seeing them on here. Let's scroll up here and see what we find. All right, UK, no data, it looks like. That's fantastic. They're one of like 3 people that we don't have data for. But anyway, notice who we are similar to, and notice who we are far away from, and notice what category we are in. So what your book calls perceived high proportion of incarceration is actually factual, because we have the numbers that show it, right? So we'll keep a nice kind of critical reading of that. Negative effects of mass incarceration. There are lots. We're going to talk about that more in the second part of lecture. And you're going to read about it more when you read Michelle Alexander. I believe they talk about Michelle Alexander's work in your textbook. Yeah, a couple of blank stares. Everyone read the book, right? Yeah, definitely, 100%. Cool. So the general mission and features of correctional facilities. 2 different things. You have to manage correctional employees and you have to manage incarcerated people. And the reason why that is so important is because the correctional staff make up such a huge part of that system, remember? So a little over 500,000 employees in the United States. And the folks that are working in that system are the people who are actually doing the work of reform. So you're both an employer and a security organization, right? You have to deliver services. That includes healthcare, mental health care, reform programs, education, all of those things. So you are a multi kind of level, lots of, hands in lots of different baskets kind of organization. The mission is to protect the citizens from crime by safely and securely handling criminal offenders, according to your book. Do we know if incarceration prevents crime? Yeah. Also, people can commit crimes while incarcerated, and there are lots of people who commit crimes who aren't incarcerated, but that is kind of the overarching mission. And you'll see that when we get to the Oregon section, and that's reflected in the Oregon Department of Corrections mission as well. Number 2 is provide offenders some opportunities for self-improvement, increase their chance to become productive and law-abiding citizens. So that could mean a lot of different things, right? What does it mean to be productive? Does that mean productive within a capitalist paradigm? You go out, you get a job, you now produce tax dollars, you're productive that way. Does it mean that you become educated? Does it, what does that actually mean to be productive? What do we consider to be a productive citizen? And can people who've been incarcerated actually participate as full citizens, which is going to be another thing that we talk about. And whether or not the goal of incarceration is reforming people and helping them get the opportunity to become a law-abiding and productive citizen, whether or not that's sort of antithetical to being incarcerated in of itself. Lots and lots and lots of legal and ethical responsibilities. This is a big, 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 big problem. Bobby, who's the superintendent of OSP right now? Yeah, so we've had 3 different superintendents at the Penn in the last few years. What would be a good a polite way to say why Kelly got removed?
Well, I've heard rumors. I think wasn't it,
You're not going to get in trouble. Yeah. So just like judges, there are lots and lots of responsibilities when it comes to being this type of public figure, because your job is to teach people how to be better people. And so you are held to a higher standard, and the things that you do in your private life do make a difference. And of course, that's for higher level officials, right? Generally speaking, as with any organization, the folks on the front lines can get away with a little bit more. A lot of our correction systems have reputations for being less than ethical because it's a high stress environment. People are under a lot of pressure. And there is this sort of traumatic experience that is shared, and people tend to engage in a lot of substance use issues, have relational issues, so on and so forth. So there's lots of stuff we could talk about there, with the understanding that people are held to that standard. Anytime you are considered a public official as a state employee at all, you are held to a different standard than, say, working for like Nike or a different organization. So the conflicting philosophy, we talked about this a little bit. On one hand, we're supposed to hold people inside to keep the community safe. And on the other hand, we're also supposed to provide treatment for people to help them become better citizens. And there is sort of a contradiction there because it's really difficult to do that when people are inside the walls and don't necessarily have the opportunity to do things like attend schooling or vocational programs and things like that. There are other issues around the type of vocations we can offer. For instance, if you're a maximum security because of some type of weapons offense, you're probably not going to be able to go into the carpentry program where you're handling power tools and sharp objects and that kind of thing. At the penitentiary, they have a hobby shop, and it takes decades often for people to get into the hobby shop. They're on a wait list for a very long time. They have to have demonstrated good behavior for a very, very long time, and things can get really tricky there. So there's a lot of sort of clicking up within the prison system around who gets access to what types of programs. And there's this argument that on one hand, the people who maybe need those programs the best don't have access to them because the types of charges they have. And on the other hand, we have to keep people safe, including staff and other incarcerated people. This is a great slide. This is actually the slide that made me decide that I was going to use the book slides because your book authors say, the experts believe that punishments will work only under two conditions. Number one, if they injure the offenders, you don't have to write this down because it's in your book, but number one, if they injure the offender's social standing by the punishment, and number two, if they make the individual feel a danger of being excluded for the group. Here's what your textbook writer says. This view overlooks two very important facts. Facts, right? That there are perhaps a sad commentary on the kinds of lives being led by many people in the United States. Number one, most serious offenders neither accept nor abide by those norms. What does that mean? And how do you think the author is measuring most offenders neither accept nor abide by those norms? Are we doing surveys of people who commit crimes and asking them about social norms? Yeah, probably not. Most incarcerated people today come from communities where conditions fall far below the living standards that most Americans would accept. That's probably true. And the way that your author sort of presents this argument is that these experts, AKA, who does he say are experts in your book? Anybody?
There's mostly for people who haven't been locked up.
Yeah, I mean, and he doesn't actually define which experts are being criticized here. And at the same time, the authors are using the exact same sort of expertise, right? They're saying, because we are authors of this book, you should believe our opinion and not these other sort of unknown, unnamed expert opinions, right? So there's kind of this inherent contradiction in this section of your book. And so that's something to keep in mind when you're reading is, okay, who are the experts he's talking about? What makes them experts? And then what makes this person an expert to say that those people are wrong? What data is it being based on? How are we actually measuring that data? Is it based on sort of anecdotal personal experience? That's valid. And what does the rest of the data say? So we want to look at all of those things. I like this, confers status in some neighborhoods. I don't know if your textbook authors have been in some neighborhoods, or again, what does that mean, right? Are they basing that off of like early 90s rap music, which is made for entertainment? Are they basing it off of their conversations with inmates? I mean, there's so many different factors, but they don't actually tell you what that means or where they get that idea while presenting it as fact, right? This is another thing to think about when you write your papers, which we're going to talk about after break, is what is the author saying? Where did they get that information? Is this sort of a colloquially commonly known fact, or is this sort of a cultural opinion? Billy?
Could conferring status also go on the other spectrum of like having like a status, like kind of mentioning like a stigma, I guess.
Yeah, right. So there's kind of a contradiction there. Yeah. And the stigma piece is definitely part of it. And it's not just stigma. So legally, in some states, people who are felons cannot vote, cannot be on juries. If you go to apply for a job, and you have a record, when you apply for housing and you have a record, all of those things, that's not just stigma, those are real things that are barriers for people who do want to be successful in the community. So there's a lot of kind of just weird stuff to pay attention when you read your textbook about this. So on a more less critical note, the way we classify. So every state and the federal system, and even a lot of local systems, have classifications based on security level. Those are based on a bunch of different things. It's initially based on the type of charges that a person is convicted of, and then it can change based on their behavior. So you might go in, let's say you're 1 through 5. Like in Oregon, we have 1 through 5. If you're maximum custody, you're level 5. With good enough behavior over time, you might be able to work down to a 4 unless you have certain types of charges that deem you a high security risk. So if you're formerly a death row inmate, aggravated murder, things like that. If you're a lifer, they will often automatically make you a 5. And the reason for that is because even if you have the best behavior in the world, the idea is that if you have nothing to lose, you might be more prone to certain types of behaviors while incarcerated. Not sure if there's a lot of data that backs that up, rather other than kind of localized state data, at least none that's publicly available that I could find while I was looking. It can also move up. Let's say you go on as a 1, you have very, sort of minor charges, but you get into a fight every other day and then you shank somebody, you're going to slowly work your way up to a 5, and then you're in some trouble. And then you might go from a minimum security to a medium security to a maximum security. And that's going to affect the programs that you have access to. It's going to affect what your day-to-day life looks like, all of those things. Excuse me. Security level also affects physical restraints. If you are a security level 5, you have to legally have different restraints than somebody who's a 1 or a 2. So when you are driving down the highway and you see the gentleman with the jeans with the big orange DOC on the back picking up trash off the side of the road, those are typically 1s and 2s. They come from minimum or sometimes medium security, and you'll notice that they are not cuffed. But folks that are 5 might be wearing a belly chain, ankle chains, wrist restraints, so on and so forth, anytime they leave the institution. It makes a difference in how many officers have to go with you when you leave the institution. It makes a difference on where you're allowed to go within the institution. It can make a difference on where you're housed in the same institution. So in maximum security, for instance, we have dorms, we have cells, we have single cells, we have honors units, all of those kinds of things. So there is incentive to maintain good behavior. And again, for folks that have kind of that inherent higher security level due to the type of crime, there's already kind of a, an automatic change there in terms of what they can access. So according to Robert Levinson, 4 categories are security needs, custody assignment, so again, where they end up going, housing needs, and program classification. So let's say we have, a county jail, but we only have 4 max security beds, but we need 8, right? We have to take those things into account, and we need to figure out where are we going to put those other 4 people, how are we going to manage them, and then we're going to question, do they actually need to be at that security level? Bobby?
So
Billy?
Security, custody, housing,
Program classification. So what programs do you have access to? So up until recently, this was pretty subjective. Our current system of classification is fairly objective. When we get to the community corrections unit, we're going to look at LSCMI assessments, which is an assessment that you basically do. I might even make you do them on each other because I think they're fun, where you look at things like what kind of friends does the person have? What is their drug and alcohol history like? What kind of support do they have? What kind of employment do they have? All of these sort of correlates with chances of committing, another crime, recidivism, or what security level we think they're going to be. We use that in conjunction with other types of objective measures to determine a person's security level. So in Oregon, for instance, if you get in trouble for certain types of DRs, discipline reports, some of them give you, you're going to have a higher security level for 6 months. Some of them it's going to be a year. Some of them it's temporary until you go through certain types of programming, and others there's none at all. It just depends on what it's for. So much more objective. There's also sort of an inherent court system, at least in Oregon. If you get a DR, you get to have a trial, sort of. It's with the disciplinary team, and you get to go and they look at the reports from the officer, and you get to speak for yourself, and then they decide what your sentence is. And that might be a change in security level, loss of programming, all those kinds of things. It obviously doesn't have outside oversight, so it's problematic, but on paper, you know, it looks fair. Organizations. Here's how old school your book graders are. Warden. We don't have wardens anymore. We have superintendents. Although when I first started, I'm gonna date myself here, our superintendent insisted that people still call him warden because he was kind of a fan of that older sort of system. These are generally different based on the state. But we do have kind of a general here, like we have medical, we have industries. Industries is the stuff that gets the prison running. The prison is basically its own little town. It has laundry, it has food service, it has plumbing to take care of, lots of it. There's electricity to take care of. There's cell maintenance, there's cleaning that needs to be done, there's medicine that needs to be passed out, there's food that has to be purchased. There's an entire little ecosystem in of itself. So that's going to be our industries. Our medical services, doctors, nurses, so on and so forth. Our personnel folks, our HR folks, our criminal investigator. In Oregon, we actually have the inspector general, which is totally separate from the correction system, because having the person inspecting the correction system working for the correction system, a little bit shady, kind of a conflict of interest. And yet, as you can see from your book, a lot of systems still have that. From there, we have our actual operations folks. You're gonna have we have COs. In Oregon, we have officers, corporals, sergeants, lieutenants, and captains. So it's very militaristic. You have your officer in charge, who's the captain who's in charge for the whole ship, so on and so forth. You don't have to know this, it's just, an example. And then we have our programs, our education, our religious services. Almost every prison has a law library, recreation services, and then business stuff. So business stuff is going to be the folks who manage the warehouse, the folks that take care of the canteen where you can order your food, all those kinds of things.
What do they specifically have a law libraries? Those have education.
Well, some have a whole library, but that depends. That's a whole fun topic. Because one of the big things folks are allowed to do is access legal information, precedents, that kind of thing, if they're trying to fight their case. And that is part of your constitutional right to have, representation. And so let's say you end up incarcerated, you don't agree with your sentence, or let's say you're appealing, or you're trying to get out early. All of those things you are supposed to have access to legal services. And it might not be easy to always get your attorney in. There's something in the chat. It's in your book. Poor Toby. I see that. I know. Toby, everyone can see you. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's fair. We can see the words, not the. Yep.
Hi, Kobe. I miss you.
Billy misses you. Oh, where are we at here? We talked about these. Ooh. Federal prison. Yeah. Awesome. I think there's someone else there too. There was at least one other person who emailed me about attending via Zoom. So here are your federal prisons. We have 7 minimum security and so on and so forth. Administrative security, what do you think that means? It sounds like it could be. And what it actually is here are individuals that have some sort of security need that doesn't fit these other categories, right? So if I've incarcerated El Chapo, who's escaped like 13 times, good for him, I'm probably not going to put him in a regular high security where he's already escaped multiple times. Go ahead.
Sorry, this is related to
Yeah.
My cousin works at the state next in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that he's a total win.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He always asks for blankets.
Mm-hmm.
Like stuff like that. My kid's like, dude.
You know what? Drug cartel, he's from Mexico. He's not used to Colorado weather. They probably did that on purpose, to be honest. Like, that's a thing. I mean, that's a thing that like staff would do, right?
This is like 65.
Put you somewhere cold because you're from somewhere warm and they want you to be miserable. Are you still on IOP? Are you still, or IEP, whatever, rather? Are you still under custody?
No.
Okay, so, oh yeah.
No.
Okay, so you can speak freely.
Yeah, I just made that September 13th.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, well, you're allowed to talk. Good job. Fair enough. Yeah, so this is similar in the state. We have ADSEG, administrative segregation. So go ahead. Pretty much. Yeah, folks who don't fit into the other categories. Let's see. It can also be the other way around. So maybe it's somebody who is under custody but isn't necessarily incarcerated. We do sometimes have people. So Translee, for instance, what Bobby experienced was when you are still sentenced for a certain amount of time, but you get out early, you are still technically in custody of the state, but it's almost like having parole. Very, very similar, except if you violate it, you have to go back and finish the rest of your sentence. So it could be something like that, more minimal type security. If you want a career with the Bureau of Prisons, lots of opportunities here, pretty good pay, websites. Thanks, guys, that's useful. I will post the websites. Yeah, that's whatever. Who here is familiar with federal pay grades? So same pay grades as the military. Yeah, so GS1 through 15, which is up to master's level. And your pay grade is based on that level. So yeah, pretty good benefits. Being a federal employee is great, and obviously it can be a tricky job. We got rid of federal parole in 1987 and combined it with the Bureau of Prisons. So since then, folks that are in federal prison can have no more than 54 days a year subtracted. Part of this is mandatory minimum sentencing, which we're going to talk about with mass incarceration. It was upheld in 2010 by the US Supreme Court, so this has not gone away. Basically, you get a federal sentence, you are serving that sentence. And then for folks that do need additional supervision, it doesn't happen often, but you might be under supervision either with US Marshals or with some sort of localized, your state probation parole or county probation parole. Supermax, these exist in both state and federal prisons. First one was in 1983 in Marion, Illinois, because 2 officers were murdered by inmates on the same day, and the warden put the prison in quote unquote permanent lockdown, and that institution has stayed that way since. We only have one Supermax, which is probably the one that your family member works at in Florence, Colorado. It is the only federal Supermax. The states all have, we don't, in Oregon, again, we don't call it Supermax. We have our maximum security prison, which is the Oregon State Penitentiary. And then we have special management housing, which has a few other categories, including mental health housing. And then we had death row until recently. And then we have administrative segregation, which is more of a designation. This person is at risk for some reason. Maybe they're not the ones who are violent. Maybe they're the ones who are being threatened and we're worried that they're going to be injured or killed by something else. Maybe there's a security risk because of an investigation with staff and they don't want them to be near certain staff. There are all sorts of reasons why somebody might be put in ADSEG. Maybe they've been sexually assaulted and we have to separate them from their cellmate. They might end up segregated that way. There's all sorts of reasons. So it's not necessarily just folks that are at high risk for violence. It can be for other reasons as well. Okay.
It's like with a lot of abuse of power too, like people with mental illnesses also get locked up like that.
Oh yeah.
People were just like, and I noticed there was a disproportionate amount of LGBTQ. Also
Yep, absolutely. Particularly in women's prisons, we see a lot of NPR did a really interesting special a couple months ago just on women's prisons, and particularly during the Stonewall riots and the participation of incarcerated women, because there was a jail that was right next to where Stonewall happened, and sort of the participation of women who were there and the way that those who were LGBTQ were treated. And there's kind of a whole, they wrote a whole book about it, and then they were talking to somebody on NPR about it. Anyway, so federal supermaxes have helicopters and inmates are isolated. At the penitentiary, we do not have helicopters because the building is 150 years old and they are really proud of that. My office had a lot of asbestos and mold and other pipes and just stuff, which is fine, you know, it's a cool building. Things that happen when people are max security. So federally, and there are standards for this, the NCCHC, the National Commission on Correctional Healthcare, requires that all inmates need to get at least an hour a day of out of cell time. So 1 hour a day to go pace by yourself. Meals are alone in cells. No group or social activity is permitted. Typically denied access to vocational educational training programs. Now, what that doesn't mean is that you don't have access to things like the library. You can still request books. You still have access to legal resources, those kinds of things. In some states, like on death row in Oregon, for instance, the death row folks were able to have computers in their cell. They had to pay for them and they were very, very, very much locked down. And because of the nature of the building itself, they didn't have easy access to do visits with their attorneys and they weren't allowed to go physically to the law library. And so that was a whole, it was actually cheaper to just let them have computers than to have the library folks come back and forth between the 11 manned gates that it takes to get to death row. So lots of different things there. The effects of supermax prisons. So what your author refers to as social pathology. So lots of research showing that isolation makes people worse, right? People do not behave well when they are isolated. And so if we isolate somebody because of violence, but then the isolation itself increases their propensity to violence, that's a problem, right? It's kind of a chicken or an egg issue. They're not terribly effective for controlling violence and disturbances within the prison. We know that people still get around things, riots still happen, violence still happens. And according to researchers that your authors cite, supermax prisons should not be used for their current purpose because they aren't super effective at that purpose. Hence El Chapo, right? Loss of escapes. And it's the whole environment is sort of problematic, right? If the goal is to keep people out of society, that works. And if we're trying to balance that with cost effectiveness and keeping that person a productive member, even if it's just of the prison environment itself. You know, we have lots of lifers who have really important jobs within the prison and that is their life. And we know that it ends up being a little cheaper long-term to give them that kind of job. Obviously, with really high security folks like that who have lots of money and can bribe people and maybe have other people kind of underneath them and, you know, shot callers in the gangs and different things like that, there are all sorts of considerations. So there's really not like a one size fit all solution for the folks that we would consider to be supermax security. So considered to still be constitutional, but there are a few caveats. So in this first case, Madrid versus Gomez in 1995, this was about California's Pelican Bay security housing unit. The judge did not like it, quoted that it was hauntingly similar to that of caged felines pacing in a zoo, but concluded that there was no constitutional basis to close it. Essentially that it did not meet the 8th Amendment threshold for cruel and unusual punishment. And Jones L. versus Burge in 2004, this was a huge case. Essentially that supermax was not appropriate for folks with mental illness. In Oregon, we continued to, we didn't call it Supermax. We had intermediate care housing where I worked, behavioral health care units, and mental health infirmary, the three that were in special management housing with death row. That is where folks with mental illness went in the same building as folks on death row. And they were essentially treated like Supermax. Rather than having open bars like the other cells in the institution, they had a piece of plexiglass, some grating, and another piece of plexiglass with a slot for meals. We're not allowed to have shared meals. Some would get yard time. Some only got an hour a day by themselves. Shower access was problematic, all sorts of issues. So they were essentially being treated as Supermax. And it wasn't until Disability Rights Oregon came in 2013, 2014. So about 10 years after the Supreme Court case, and said, hey, like, you're not allowed to do this now, it's illegal. And they started changing that. Continues to be problematic and is slowly changing. A lot of that reason is for structure, right? It takes a long time to build new buildings, takes a lot to get funding, all of those things. And, you know, it still took 10 years. So we're not really going to talk about private prisons because it's not super relevant to Oregon, because our constitution does not allow them, but know that they exist and they are a problem, and you will be reading all about them in the Alexander book. So we will skip that. Jails. So again, jails are local, and this is where you go while you're awaiting trial. Once you've been arrested, you might be placed in a holding cell. Some jails have, you know, the quote unquote drunk take. Others have just a singular holding cell at the actual police station. There's all different ways. A lot of smaller counties have the police station attached to the jail. Even some larger counties, at Multnomah County, the Multnomah County Justice Center has the courts on the bottom portion and then several stories of the actual jail over top, which, you know, is much more efficient to transport folks, all of those things. So this is for folks who can't post bonds. We talked about bond reform already. And folks who have lesser offenses that have less than, you know, in Oregon, at least less than a year sentence. The kind of things that affect jail organization. So how many beds do we have available? Do we have the capacity to process all of these individuals? Do we have the staff? Do we have the funding? You're probably aware that in some jurisdictions in Oregon, officers have been told to no longer take certain types of offenders to jail because they don't have room, or because there aren't enough staff to process them, or because they're going to get let out the next day, and so on and so forth. And it ends up being more costly to book and process a person than to just let them go, particularly for those nonviolent offenses. So direct supervision. This pod that you see here in this first picture looks a lot like Multnomah County and like some of the smaller medium and minimum security institutions in Oregon. In our max, we have more of a tier. And our tier system, let's see here. Images. I found one. Yep, this is what our tiers look like. In fact, I think that's the unit I worked on. So 50 cells, 4 tiers, 5 tiers, 5 tiers, 50 cells, 5 tiers. Most are 2 men per cell. Open bars, and then this is an officer walking the tier, and then the actual office is going to be where you all are sitting, which is down at the end. Some of the others, so the honors unit has closed doors like this, and some tables and things out and about, and then some of our minimum and maxes, or some of our minimums and mediums have closed doors and tables out and about. Boop-a-doop-a-doo. Here we are. Jail treatment programs. So there are lots when there is funding, and it depends. Jails tend to have less than prisons because people aren't there for very long. But in general, we might have, you know, drug and alcohol, domestic violence, diversion, all sorts of programming for folks to participate in. And we know that it is generally effective.
You want to do something on that?
Absolutely.
And it also depends who the elected sheriff is.
Mhm.
Also, we might have a sheriff that don't want to do nothing, or a sheriff that is willing to bring programs.
Yep. Politics is a big, 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 big part of it. Let me see that. Technology. So we have video visits now. That was huge during the pandemic, but existed before that too. People can use the phone. Contrary to popular belief, inmates are not sitting around watching cable TV on big screens. If they have a TV at all, it's because they purchased it themselves, and they are tiny little things that come in plastic casing. Every device a person is allowed to purchase comes in clear plastic casing because they have to have all of the wires visible at all times. Some of the units had like a single big TV with like a PlayStation that the guys could purchase themselves, and had some very, very, very strict controls on it. We ended up getting a Wii at one point, but that was problematic for a number of reasons. Inmates use technologies to obtain contraband. So how many days did it take at the pen after they got the tablets before somebody found a way to download porn? Like 3.
Yeah, it was pretty quick. Well, yeah, there's a few times about those tablets.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy how I remember someone showed me how to get to it.
Mhm.
It was just who knew how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Implement that into a system.
Pretty quick. And with the caveat that the staff can see everything that you are doing. And so if you are chatting with your lady friend and things get a little frisky, the staff are watching that. And they will either punish you for it, or they will wait until just the right moment, and then they will interrupt you and still punish you for it. So technology is an issue. Nope. No, we do not have conjugal visits anymore. You are not even allowed to kiss open mouth. You are allowed to hold hands across the table and do a brief hug.
Is there any reason for that? Is it safety?
Oh yeah. Balloons and Beth, so on and so forth. It's a safety issue, but it's also a control issue. So no online sexy times. That's a thing. Same with the phone. People can listen in on your phone calls if they feel a need. And a lot of that is, they want to make sure you're not planning an escape and so on and so forth, or they're bored, or, hey, I caught you getting frisky with your lady friend, give me $50. There's all sorts of reasons. And ideally it is to maintain safety and security, right? There have been arguments made in Oregon. People are allowed to possess certain types of what I wouldn't necessarily call pornography. Like they're allowed to have Playboy, things like that. They're allowed to have, I think, everything except full frontal nudity. Yeah. Because people would have like bikini calendars and things.
So they allow one magazine that's called Strip. That is completely nude.
Okay.
But they won't allow like a nude photo from your girlfriend or wife.
Okay.
So there's like one magazine for some reason they allow it, but usually, yeah, you can't have the nudity. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not allowed to have things on display in your cell. Like if you do have those sorts of things, it has to be kept privately, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of kind of lockdown around media in that way. Even with films, a lot of prisons have a movie library that the inmates purchase, and certain films are not allowed or allowed. And there are also things that you wouldn't expect. So books and movies that have anything around survivalism, for instance, because it could be used in case of an escape. You're definitely not going to watch Shawshank Redemption, anything like that that has escape scenes, escape methods, or anything around outdoor living, all kinds of things you would not expect. And then other things that you would be surprised. For instance, Michael's not here, but he walked in on Keith Jesperson reading a book called The Art of Butchering one day, but he was reading it just kind of out, in the, everyone knows who Keith Jesperson is, yeah. Happy Face Killer. He's one of Oregon's kind of more notorious serial killers. He didn't even butcher or kill his victims. He just liked to do things like that to screw with the other guys. So you're allowed to have The Art of Home Butchering. illustrated, but you can't have, you can't read Hatchet because there's all of that sort of survivalism skill in there where if somebody were to escape, they would now know those things. So there's a lot of kind of arbitrary rules around what types of books are allowed, what books are not, movies that are allowed, what movies are not, what you're allowed to use the technology for, all those things. Music is pretty strict. You can purchase an MP3 player, you can purchase songs, but it's very, very strict on what you're actually allowed to purchase. Drones can help deliver contraband. Probably not going to happen at OSP because we have 5 towers that are gunned. There was a case a couple of years ago where somebody trained carrier pigeons and you're not allowed to shoot them. So, because that's a law. Yeah. And there was like a thing going around that was like free the homie pigeon because of course they got captured and sent to the zoo and, yeah, like pigeon lives matter. That was a whole thing. Drugs and cell phones. So up until recently, staff were not allowed to have cell phones. And then just a few years ago, they were allowed to have cell phones because they realized, well, we obviously can't stop them anyway. They're bringing them in. We might as well find a way to monitor it and keep it safe, which is problematic. Yeah. Drug use is a problem. Getting drugs in is a problem. People find all sorts of creative ways to get drugs in. Staff get drugs in, inmates get drugs in, visitors bring drugs in, carrier pigeons bring drugs in, you name it. I wonder if I could find that. You're incarcerated. I mean, you have lots of time. Like, look at this. Oh, this is a comment apparently. This is all over the place. Look at that. Oh no, look at this guy. Look at his little backpack. Really, it's kind of brilliant. Yeah, you have a lot of time. And the thing with drugs is that a lot of the things that you have access to while incarcerated, you have to pay for. So if you are doing a job where you're making 13 cents an hour, but you want to eat something other than what they're, doing at the slot hall, and you want to purchase different items that cost more than they cost in the rest of the world, people find creative ways to make money. So there are just all sorts of issues with that, right? People sell all kinds of things. That's one of the main reasons why people aren't allowed to have photos of their significant others, is because people will try to buy them or sell them. And it's just a whole thing. Body scanners. So in years past, when we didn't have visiting changing every other week due to COVID, I would take this class to the prison and you would have to get scanned in. So very similar to the airport, you go through a metal detector. They make sure you don't have anything bad. You put everything in a locker, you're allowed to go in. What these can't detect is if you have something like a balloon full of meth that you've swallowed. So always kind of a problem. Funding from the prison canteen is often used to implement different security systems. So that money, those honey buns that you pay twice as much for, that money goes either back to the canteen or it goes to prevention type programs. It might go to purchase the actual technology that is used to prevent things like substances from getting in. Lots of things here. So web-based system, we use a program called DOC 400. I don't know if I could find it or not. Screenshot, because it is from like before all of you were born. Nope. I don't even know if you can take screenshots of it. Has anyone ever used MS-DOS before? Yeah, one person. How old are you, Billy? Am I allowed to ask that?
Yeah, sure.
You're what?
20.
Okay, well then why have you used MS-DOS? That's true. Like old video games that have been around for a very long time. Black screen, all caps, neon green, like you've seen it in movies. That's what we use to keep track of offenders. Automated system. So this is kind of our every 6 months person pops up and says, hey, this person's supposed to be reevaluated, or hey, this person's security level is going down, all that kind of stuff. And then obviously computers. So every office in the prison has a computer. All the staff have access to computers. Email, IM, all the usual stuff, but mainly the main technology that's used is our radio, because there are lots of times where you aren't at your computer. And if there's only one computer per unit, but you have 5 officers, everyone's got a radio. your radios have panic buttons, all that kind of thing. Virtual visits, we talked about that. I tried to set up a virtual visit to have a few other of the guys that worked for me to attend today. And because of all the changes in superintendent, that didn't happen. Yeah. The main reason is because first they said yes, because you used to work here and it's students and we're not going to treat it any differently than if you were to bring them in person for a walkthrough. And then they said about a week ago, yes, and they all need to fill out a visitor form. And that was a week ago. And the visitor form requires your name, your driver's license, your social security number, so on and so forth. And I'm like, well, that's kind of problematic because if I have students that don't feel comfortable doing that, I can't require them to be here. And if there's ever anybody on a video visit that isn't authorized to visit, they turn it off. So that's the other thing. If you are on a video visit and like a little kid runs across in the background and that kiddo is not on your visiting list, your visit is over. It'd be just like if they were trying to come in person. So very, very strict rules around visiting. Folks that don't pass certain types of background checks are not allowed to visit. Folks that are formerly incarcerated at that institution tend to not be allowed to visit unless it's for some sort of special program. There are all kinds of rules around that. All right, let's take 5 minutes and then we're going to come back and talk about Angela Davis. Did everyone read it? Did everybody not read it? You can be honest. A couple people didn't read it. All right, well, let's take a vote. So when you get back, it'll be a little after 7 and we can either give you another week to read it and do that next week and spend an entire hour and a half talking to Bobby, or we can spend some time on this stuff. And then let Bobby have the floor. So who wants option A? Give you another week to do the reading and yeah, so option A is give you another week to do the reading and skip that part of the lecture for now. And then option B is do the lecture anyway, even though nobody read it. So option A. Okay, all right, take your break. It's fine. We are gonna go over a couple of things when you come back from break, but don't take your break. By the way, oh, I'll tell you after you come back from break.
There's a restaurant out here.
Yeah, yep, right up there and to your right. Okay. I'm going to pause this. Don't let me forget to turn it back on, okay? Recording on. Okay. More. Pause. All right, let's get back to it. So, some changes on your syllabus, which is on Canvas. And did I? Yes, I did. I made sure that I hit the little green button this time. Thanks. Thank you, Anaya. It's a thing that doesn't always happen. What's going on? Ooh, look at that. So the main change is, since we didn't get to everything about the court system, we're going to do that later in the term. And since this class is about 2/3 the size as it has been in the past, we only have 1 week of focus group presentations. What that means is that you get an extra week to read Michelle Alexander's book. It was previously due on the 22nd. It is now due on the 29th, and you should have probably already started it because it is long. We've talked about that already a lot. So yeah, read Alexander's book. Buy it used. It's been out for a while. Yeah. The new Jim Crow. It is on here under your reading list that apparently the bookstore did not.
The only thing that was like buried in the reading list was the optional, what's the movie with Michael B. Jordan?
Oh, Just Mercy.
So that was the only thing that had, like, so when I looked at the required reading on the bookstore,
Yeah.
it told me to get that and nothing else. And I was like, I feel like that's wrong.
You know, this happens every year. Literally every year. And it's okay. It's all right. It's It's a thing. So that's the big change. You have an extra week to read Michelle Alexander's book, New Jim Crow, and then we will talk about Angela Davis's book stuff when we talk about the rest of the court methods and punishment stuff, which I moved to next week. Yeah. Oh, that's perfect. Yeah. Please read this before next week. It only takes a few hours, I promise. All right. Floor is yours. Oh, wait. Oh, other thing. A thing that is on here. Am I still sharing my screen? Yes. I added a bunch of stuff for your paper. So here is a rubric. So you know what I am looking for. This is a research paper. Please do not send me a high school essay that has an introduction, a conclusion, and 3 body paragraphs, because I will stab myself in the eye with a fork, and then I will set them all alight in my house with myself in it. Just don't do it, okay? I'll be very sad. Please write me a research paper. Right, yeah, I'll let the dog, the dog won't be in it, but yeah, the dog's gonna be good, yeah. Yes, APA format. I will not be, you're not going to dock points if you decide you want to use a different format, as long as you use it correctly. And the reason I say that is because if you're looking at legal proceedings, some of them are in Chicago style. And so if you have a preference, or if the argument that you are making in your paper is primarily legal based, as opposed to looking at like social research or whatever, you know, just use a format that would be needed for a journal. APA is the standard for the university. I'm sure you all have done it and had it beat into your heads 3,000 times. Yes, you have. Stop it. You've never written an APA style paper.
No, absolutely. You're right.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. So, okay, also pro tip, please do not feel like you have to handwrite your citations in your works cited list, okay? Find some free software somewhere that does it for you. Yep. Find, like, plug in the DOI number and it'll spit out a citation. All right. If you screw up your citations, I'm going to judge you, because you can find places that will literally do it for you. Yeah.
If you're using the George Fox Library, double, triple check the citations. They're not always correct.
God damn it.
Always screwed up.
Why?
It's bad.
Okay.
Double,
Okay.
triple check.
Okay.
You're gonna have to
Yeah.
read the
Good to know. Okay. Also, don't go purchase a manual. I know it's on your book list. It's on the book list for every freaking class that you take. I don't care. Yeah. Yeah, sure. If you're doing APA style, do it APA style. It is set up to be sort of a literature review, meaning you're reviewing literature. And I put up 2 great little articles here on what a literature review means. And also just go read another one. You will find lots of them, right? You've probably read them in other classes. You can just go on Google Scholar and type in literature review and read a random literature review on whatever you want, so you can see what that actually looks like. The methods section is typically, here's what I searched for, here's how I narrowed it down, here's what I decided to include, the actual methodology of your research, because by compiling sources, you yourself are doing research, right? So the methodology section here isn't going to be the same as it would be for, say, an experiment or a quasi-experiment. It would just be, I conducted a literature review and here's how. Hierarchy of sources is here. Basically, you know, you can use quotes from your family member that works at the Colorado Supermax, because that's interesting and that's cool. And it's not going to count toward your, your 10 sources. So you have to have 10 sources, and the majority of them need to be some sort of peer-reviewed academic publication. That can be papers, that can be books, that can be actual social experiment papers, like research papers. It can be other literature reviews. It can be whatever you want, but it has to be some sort of academic source. Can also be credible non-academic sources. So this is where you use some of those government databases that I gave you links to earlier in the term. This is where you can use stuff from like nonprofit agencies, like RAIN, for instance, all those kinds of things. On your actual rubric, I list how many of each I expect. It's not as scary as it sounds, right? So when you go look up research paper literature reviews, you're going to see ones that use like 300 sources. You need to have 10. Yeah. Oh, you were just doing something. Okay. Any questions about any of the things I put on here? So yeah, take a look at that. That's all there. Read the rubric. If you have any questions about it, let me know. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, and it might not be, because I often think there's things that I think are self-explanatory and they often are not. So without further ado, I am going to turn off the screen share and I'm going to put this over here. You can sit. You're gonna stand? Okay, well, here you go. Do you want to introduce yourself or would you like me to introduce you?
Hello,
All right.
a couple students in there. My name's Bobby. You're about to find out who I am anyway, so. My name's Bobby Jackson. I was incarcerated for 8.5 years, 102 months. I was sentenced to 120 months for robberies. I was 24 years old when that happened. It's a long story. I have nothing prepared as in like a speech. So I'm just gonna go off the top of my head. Does anybody in here know anybody that's incarcerated right now or ever been incarcerated? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Someone close? Real close? Who do you know? Your uncle? Yeah. You?
Who's that coworker?
Coworker?
My father was incarcerated.
Your dad? What do you? All of your grandparents? Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. Was there anybody else? Your dad? So who had the dad? You and how old were you when he went to prison? Were you alive?
5.
5? 10. Yeah. I had a daughter, or I have a daughter. She was just under 3 months when I went to prison. She was 9. No, she was 8 when I got out. She turned 9 right after I got out. So I relate kind of with you guys. It's just crazy because in America, pretty much everybody kind of knows someone that's fell into the justice system. What do you guys think the #1 reason is people go get involved in the justice system? To start, what do you think? What's the top one you think? Why are people get caught up with the law?
Necessity.
Necessity as in they want to make money?
Yeah, like they didn't really have another option.
Like no other option. So this, I'm gonna put with necessity. This don't really work. That's all right. Necessity. So put it down here. I might spell it wrong. Who else?
Get caught up in the wrong crowd.
So
I mean, like.
peer pressure or
They kind of get roped in.
let's just put I'm gonna put peer pressure or just peers. What else?
Where they live.
Where they grew up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just put childhood. What else? There's a huge one that no one's even touched yet.
I'd say maybe like they were born into it, almost like.
So childhood.
Okay.
So just kind of you born in this certain neighborhood, you're supposed to be a blood or a crip.
Maybe they just enjoy it or
Get a rush.
like
It kind of it's a fantasy to them that they get a rush from it. There's those type of people. They just want to try something that gives them adrenaline. I'd just say that's a adrenaline junkie. Anything else? How about this one?
What's the other big one that goes with that? Which is what I thought about. Bobby, do you mind sharing a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm about to get right into that.
To be fair, I told him, I was like, they don't prepare the questions, you don't have to prepare anything.
So, I'll just start with, I joined the Marine Corps, signed an open contract to kind of just get out of the situation I put myself in at 19. I think at 19, my 20th birthday, 19th or 20th birthday. Anyways, so I went and I did everything Marines do for the most part, as in training. Went to my MOS school, combat training, got out, got stationed, and had to have surgeries on my elbow. That was the first one. And in that surgery, I got a bone infection. Well, at first it was a staph infection, led to a bone infection. And just had to keep on having surgeries on that same elbow. Had something, asthma, got caught with asthma with the diesels. This all happened at the same time. So as I'm getting surgeries on my arm and trying to take care of this, got a bone infection, PICC line in my arm, just trying to heal this. I woke up one night, couldn't breathe, just literally could not breathe. Called 911, went to the hospital. I was in there for like a week. Had asthma. I don't know what it was from. Never had an asthma attack ever in my life. Just out of nowhere. Maybe the diesel smoke, because I was a diesel mechanic. That's the only thing. And I was always in little, whatever you call them, when we worked on the trucks. Anyways, so and then they found an aneurysm on my heart. So all this stuff happened, and I was getting pain pills to take care of my pain with my arm and all this. But also, right, what am I dealing with at that same time is like depression. I couldn't work, I couldn't be a Marine, right? So everybody else was doing what they signed up for and I wasn't. So that was something I dealt with anyways. So I got medically retired from the Marine Corps, mostly because of my heart, but the arm was a big one too. And I came home with an addiction, spiraled real fast. And I ended up robbing pharmacies for the pain pills that I was prescribed. I was never cut off, right? You hear those stories of just like people that were on prescription pills for a while, doctor cuts them off, they go to heroin or they do something crazy to get their drugs. Mine wasn't like that. Mine just became never enough, right? The doctor couldn't give me enough. I would run out fast. And then I was selling them too. I was just caught up in the whole life cycle of addiction, substance abuse, mental health, all that. And yeah, I robbed pharmacies with an airsoft gun and got 10 years in prison. So when you get arrested, right, the first thing you go to is you go to jail. And that's where you're pre-trial. The first thing, they have to arraign you, I believe, in the first 24 hours. So you have to see a judge. And usually that is just like a little tiny room, just real quick. Everybody that got like arrested the night before goes in there. And usually the attorney, you don't meet the attorney before then, but there's an attorney there just on standby. It's usually video, you know, so you don't get to talk to an attorney before. But usually he asks to release you, right? That's just him. That's what everybody wants, you know. Can he get out? And so he does that for you anyways, but you usually get a bond set right there. So mine was set at $300,000 in the state of Oregon to be able to post bail. You have to pay 10% of your bond, whatever your bond is. So mine would have been $30,000 to get out. On top of that, they put a public safety hold on me, which they could do, I believe, 2 times. And they're both 45 days. So that means you can't post bail because you're a public safety risk. and the judge has ordered that you can't post bail until that period's over with. They did that twice on me. But my previous record, I had DUIs, so I had substance abuse issues in high school. Right, so I mean, my addiction didn't just pop up, it kind of did, but then it like I have been prone to like stuff, you know, so. When I did 5 months in jail, I believe. And does anybody know or have questions about pretrial? So that's when I'm in jail, right? I get my charges, so I get arraigned, right? You'll have your charge, you'll have what they call you'll have charges, but you're not indicted, right? A jury hasn't indicted you. It's literally from the cop's probable cause statement. So when you're arrested, that cop has to give a probable cause statement and why he arrested you and took you to jail. And he sends it to the DA, right, with all the evidence. And the DA has to go to a grand jury. And I don't even know who makes up the grand jury.
Yours was a grand jury case, but sometimes it can just be a regular jury or a judge.
Okay.
The prosecutor can do it directly. Did you choose a bench or a jury trial?
So I didn't do either.
Did you take a plea bargain?
Yeah, took a plea. So they call it a true, when you get indicted, it's called a true bill. Right? You get your true bill. Those are the charges you have been charged with, and they're gonna try to convict you of. So like my probable cause, I was arrested on like, I think that he put like 3 rob twos, that's it. And when I got indicted, I had like 12 charges. Because with each robbery, they gave me a theft. Right? Anything they could find statutorily to charge you with, they put on you, right? Because the more charges they hit you with, the longer sentence they could tell you you're gonna get, and the more often than not, you're gonna take a deal, especially if you're guilty, right? But even if you're guilty, the thing about our justice system, right? And this is my opinion, even if you're guilty, shouldn't you have your day in court to be able to say what happened? Kind of. So when you take a plea deal, you don't get that chance. You give away all your rights. You just kind of negotiate a deal behind the scenes, the attorney does with the prosecutor, and you just kind of take the pill and swallow it, whatever they come up with. Yeah.
What would pre plea bargain, what would it have been for you? Or like, what do you think it would have been?
What were they like telling me?
Yeah.
So my first plea deal that the prosecutor, he wanted 140 months, measure 11, day for day. And literally on the plea deal is circled like that. I still have the first plea deal. That was his offer. Plead guilty. So, but if I went to trial, so just my 3 measure 11s alone would have put me at 210 months. Those were my serious charges. And then I had, 9 other ones. I had an aggravated theft. They would have probably gave me, it was my first offense, probably 24 for that. Possession, just say, because I had multiple possessions, just say they tacked on another 18 months. So this is probably the max I was looking at. 252 months, which is almost 25 years. What's that, 20 years? But this is the plea deal that they came with. And then I didn't take it. We had a settlement conference, which is, I show up there, the judge is unrobed. You sit down with the judge and your attorney, and the prosecutors in the judge's chambers, and the judge goes back and forth and kind of negotiates and tries to get the case settled for not to go to trial. What happened to mine was they UA'd me. And then after I gave a clean UA there, they wanted 120 measure 11, day for day. Does anybody know what measure 11 is?
Those are mandatory minimum sentencing. That is what we'll talk about next week.
Yeah.
And
And
the slides around it.
it was a ballot measure too, so the state of Oregon voted for it back in 94. Yeah, so it's been law since 94, and there's just certain crimes that if you commit, there's a mandatory minimum with it. There's a couple of charges, I think rob 2, and assault 2, a couple of the 2s. They have, like, if you're a first time offender and it's just one rob 2, they kind of take you out of measure 11, or they can, like legally they can. So, but that's a hot topic in Oregon criminal justice. Measure 11 is like one of the big things you're always going to hear is, yeah, that's what I fell under. So after I gave the clean UA, he dropped it to 120 months. And then I was still, you got to think, I never did any time. I wasn't no hardcore thug, wasn't no criminal my whole life. I didn't deal with the juvenile system. I was pretty much a normal citizen, as you would say, kind of, right? I had core beliefs that weren't normal. And we could talk about that too. But I didn't know how to do time. So 120 months to me literally was just my life. Like, how can I do 10 years? Right. And then for what I did, I knew what I did was horrible. I knew it was wrong, but was it 10 years? Like, how are you trying to give me 10 years? Like, you just don't know how to process your life getting took from you like that. You just can't understand it. So I wasn't having that either. I was just like, there's no way. And so what happened is I pleaded the judge to ask the prosecutor to come talk to me. I was just like, let me talk to him, thinking I'm going to talk my way out of something.
You're 20 at this point?
Yeah, I'm 24. 24, yes. And you got to think, so the prosecutor gets me on his desk, and I've committed a series of robberies, and he knows what type of person he's dealing with. There's nothing I'm going to say. That's what he told me is, so I got him to come in, and he says, because I was going, man, I'm just struggling with addiction. I need help. He goes, you know how many people I've prosecuted that had an addiction problem that didn't rob pharmacies? And he says there's something more. You have to understand that not everybody just goes rob pharmacies. And that's what I'm talking about is core beliefs. I had a core belief that I could do what I want when I wanted to and get what I wanted by any means, even if I had to harm someone to get it. But he gave me a deal, right? If I served 70 months, measure 11, day for day. So no good time on that 70 months. That's 5 years, 10 months. And then he stacked 50 months to make the 120. I'll just put earned time credits, AIP. 120. So that's 120 months total. But after the 70 months, I get earned time credits, and I can go to AIP, which is Alternative Incarceration Program, which there's dual diagnosis treatment, I believe in Columbia River, which they treat mental health and addiction. And then the one I went to over in Powder River is all substance abuse addiction treatment. I think there's one at OSCI is Andy. Anyway, it's pretty much drug treatment is what it is. Like it was where I went was like a residential drug treatment. It wasn't even like prison. I had my own, not my own, but you have your own room and you have about 4 different roommates and about half the size, I'd say half the size of this classroom. It was just different from where I ever been. It was like I was in college and, you know, it was relax at Powder River AIP.
That was still acts, so Powder River is also.
Yeah, in Baker City. So I did 102 months. I should have did, I believe, if I would have, I think I had the chance to do 96. And the couple reasons why I didn't get out at 96 was, one, I got in trouble twice with dirty UAs in prison. That was the only trouble I got in prison, was still dealing with my addiction. And then I didn't get in right on time because there's a process. There's just so many people trying to get in. Your window opens up. They have to put it in the computer to transfer you, all this mambo jambo. And then it finally worked out. I got transported December 1st of last year to Powder River. I got into the program December 17th of last year, which is the day I got arrested, which was kind of weird. I literally entered the program to get out of prison the same day I got arrested 8 years prior. So let's go back to pre-trial. So I pled guilty, right? When you plead guilty, you give away all your rights, all your appellate rights. You just flush them down the toilet. And I think it's the percentage of cases that end up in a plea deal in America is like 98%. So pretty much that's our system, is you kind of just work out a plea deal. And I don't agree with that system, but that's the system we have, right?
What were some of the rights that you've given up when you take a plea deal?
So all appellate rights, so I can't appeal the court for any reason. If there was, just say there was prosecutorial misconduct, there are ways to get back in the court. It's just when you plead guilty, the bar is extremely high. You can't file a direct appeal, which happens in every jury trial case. If you go to jury trial and you lose and you go to prison, your lawyer, if he don't file a direct appeal, he's going to get a PCR, post-conviction relief, filed on him for, I forget what the terminology is. No, what habeas corpus would come after the PCR, but it's for pretty much being incompetent.
Yeah, and that would be which amendment?
For
Which amendment guarantees you that you have an attorney? Competent attorney.
isn't that 7? You have a right to speak trial, and then also encompasses part
That's a
2.
good term. 9? Is it 5? Do you get your pocket constitution?
Yeah, that's one of them.
We should all know this.
Pretty inadequate counsel is so he has to file an appeal on your behalf just to go to the appeals court. You get rid of that, right? Go ahead.
What are the differences between like what kind of trial you take? So it's like the plea bargain. And
Okay, like she was saying, yeah. So there's a bench trial, a jury. Bench trial is just with the judge you've been appointed with. So he is your jury. He's going to hear both sides and he gets to decide if you're guilty or not. Jury trial is with 12 of your peers, right? And if you're Black America in Oregon, in Salem, you're not going to have 12 Black jurors. It's just ain't going to happen. So that's why it's just a system, and this is what we have. So we have to make it better, right? Because without the systems, it's chaos, right? There's that too. Go ahead.
How many pharmacies did you rob and just kind of how long?
I robbed 3 different pharmacies in a span of I think it was like 47 days, a little less than 2 months.
How did you finally get caught?
I'm 6'5".
Would you say you have a distinct voice?
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm
And are
very,
these all pharmacies that you frequented for your medication?
the last one was, yeah.
Addiction makes you do things that you would not normally do.
The last one was literally the pharmacy I got my prescriptions from every month. And like I thought about it before I went, I was just hoping that I didn't run into the one girl that might identify me, and that's exactly who it was when I went in. So she gave the police my name, and I believe in the discovery is what you get when you're charged with something. That's like all the evidence that they have against you. They have to share that with you. They can't hide any of that. The prosecutor can't, but they do. Right? They play dirty tricks. What was I talking about though? Every time I go into something, I just want to tell you about it, right? Because like I have a PhD in this criminal justice. So every little thing I know at least a little bit about.
What could be the difference between, like, I know that going to like an appeals court, they can't argue issues of fact, but like, what would be the difference in trying to take that appeal route versus taking that initial plea bargain?
So rephrase that question.
Like, would it be better, like, to maybe stay in the court system a little bit longer and try to go to an appeals court? Like, even though they can't like take down any charges, but maybe they can loosen it.
So are you asking like, would it have been better for me to go to trial and lose and just hope that I get a better answer in the appeals court?
Yeah, I guess, because I can't.
So the thing in appeal, so say I went to trial, and the things that you could appeal are if they're procedural issues, right? Say that there was a piece of evidence that we objected to, and behind the scenes, the prosecutor said that they weren't going to present this because it was something that wasn't just procedural errors, right? You could do that, sentencing errors, right? If they just miscalculate your sentence, statutorily wrong, you could appeal that, right? Overturned convictions are really, really rare. Like, so say you go to a jury trial and you're found guilty, to overturn that guilty verdict is a really high bar. It takes something really substantial to have an appeals court overturn it. Now, sentences changed and fixed, stuff like that is way more common than an overturn of conviction. Did that answer your question at all?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about your time at the pen, what that was like there, kind of what it was like on the inside, or
Yeah.
things like that?
So
And you be honest, I'm not your boss.
you go, so the first thing you're gonna do is go to Coffee Creek. And that's where you get classified and do all that stuff. And then they send you to an institution. I ended up at Two Rivers, which is, it's actually a medium max, but it's literally made after, I think this is a rumor, I don't know if it's a fact, but the way it's set up makes it seem true, is that it was the blueprint is from like a super max federal prison. And why you say that is because each unit's like its own prison. So you have 90 dudes per unit, 100 guys per unit, and that's all you see. You don't interact with any other units ever, besides if you go to like religious services or you work in the laundry together in the kitchen. So it's really secluded. There's a lot of fights at Two Rivers just because there's nothing to do. That prison sucks. That prison is horrible. So that's in Umatilla, Oregon. Anybody ever heard of it? So that's east on 82, 84. Out that way. Different, different cultures, different type of people out there. They don't really understand, a lot of them don't understand crime in a sense, they've never been around it. Yeah, so it's there's bad COs everywhere, right? There's just bad people everywhere. So, but that prison sucks. The COs out there suck. There's nothing even like, I don't want to talk about Two Rivers. I was there for like 18 months, not even, it's like a year. You're to like 15 months. And I got lucky or blessed or whatever you want to call it, because someone started choking in the day room. I was trying to go to OSP to get back to my daughter to see her more, because she was just a baby. Guy was choking on a carrot in the day room, and I gave him the Heimlich maneuver and he puked. And this was right in front of the CO station, who are just on the computer, not even realizing what's going on. Anyways, it comes all about, right, because people talk in prison. Sergeant comes to me and is just like, hey, did you do this? I was just like, yeah. And he's just like, man, I'm gonna put a memo in about you. So he writes a memo about me, and next thing you know, I get called to my counselor's office and asked if I'm still wanting to go to OSP or to the Valley. I said, yeah. And he sent me to OSP. I had to work in the call center there. That's how they made it happen. Worked there for 6 months. And then I got hired on to work for Liz after that. And then I worked for her for about 3 years. So OSP, let me just tell you the experience about going into prison, right? Especially if you don't know. You walk in and they're all watching you, right? They all want to know who the new guy is. Are you a threat? Are you a friend? Are you a foe? Are you a gang member that's one of ours? And you know what I mean? So people are wanting to know, right? People want drama in there. They want something to happen. So that's the first thing. And you just feel it. People make weird noises or say weird things to you. And you just, try to make you nervous and intimidate you. And you just kind of just have to be a man, go through those little things. But OSP is, I would say, probably the best place to do time in Oregon. Why? It's just a little bit more humane. There's a little bit more freedom that you get anywhere else besides minimums. Go ahead.
So you mentioned earlier how you were struggling with some mental health issues. Do you feel like the prison adequately helped you with those? Or
Yeah.
even at all?
Well, so I don't want to. No. So the first time I got a dirty UA, I was dealing with some family stuff. My baby's mom left me, and we were together for years, right? And she was just like that one thing I had from my past that I was holding on to, and she wanted to move on for her own mental health, right? And it hurt, and somehow I just resorted back to old behaviors, and yeah. But so I went to the hole and I kind of VHS, saying, hey, I'm dealing with this addiction. I'm in the hole now. And somehow they literally kited me back saying that we don't deal with addiction issues. Right? I go, whoa. Then I took that to Brandon Kelly months down the, maybe even a year. But farther down the road, when he was trying to do stuff to make the prison better, I would say. And I finally got into VHS and had a counselor. What was her name?
It's not Jessica, right?
I don't know. I think her last name was Rhodes. Yeah,
So if you're involved in behavioral health services, you get a classification. Your classification is based purely off their diagnosis. There are 1, 2, or 3, or 0, 1, 2, 3. If you have something like depression as your diagnosis, the VHS folks are only able to see you a certain number of times based on your classification. And for each one, that's what, like 6 months.
yeah, I gotta see her, like, I think I saw her every month.
Yeah.
She did that for me. Yeah, and that was just to check in and to like, what can they do for you really in that situation? So it's just so hard to,
The other piece of that is that if you are struggling with something like addiction, we were trained, we always put safety and security first. And so if I know that there's substances, I'm supposed to report that. Even though as an LC licensed clinician, I'm not supposed to do that. And so you have to balance your professional ethics if you are a doctor or a counselor or whatever your profession is. You have to balance your license and the ethics around your license. Because if I did that in the community, I would lose my license, I don't practice anymore. If I go to prison and I don't report that there's substances and they find out I knew about it, job. So, there'd be situations where one of my employees comes to me and says, listen, I'm struggling with this addiction issue. And I would make sure to not ask where it come from, nothing that I could share, if it was not happening, I would make sure to not recommend UAs or anything like that. And basically, here's how can we get you through this, right? But if you told your actual assigned counselor, they were required to report, which again, if you do that in the community, you need to trust. So lots of kind of ethical conundrums there. If you're doing mental health and healthcare work, you have to kind of balance those 2 things. And they did change that, right? Because of that case that VHS was not allowed to keep confidentiality.
yeah, so my counselor was able to,
Okay. Because I know that was one of the things that you were worried about when you.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, since you were only enlisting your counselor once a month, did you just have to learn how to like cope with it, or like, did you?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's always my decision, right? Unfortunately, when you're in prison, and you live there for a long time, I don't care who you are, how strong you are, there's an environment there that you're gonna rub your shoulder with every once in a while. And my thing was addiction, drugs, right? Other people's or other stuff, but there's an environment set there and you have to live there. It's hard to stay above it at all times. I commend people that do, right? But a lot of people get sucked right in and they come out way worse than they were when they went in. And that's usually what happens, especially if it's this young kids doing a couple years. It don't help them.
So how'd you make your change?
Well, I decided to change right away. So my change, I'm still like in the progress of it, right? Because I just got out in June, and this is the proving ground to get out and actually do it. But so like when I got my dirty UAs, I wasn't an addict no more. I just resorted back to old behavior. Just relapsing. Not knowing this, deciding to cope with that instead of more healthy behaviors, which I tried there for a while, it just wasn't working, right? More intense workouts, more reading. I probably needed it's just bad choice. But the change came when in county jail. I told myself that I'm going to be different. And then that's the work in progress. That reading books in prison, that's the one thing that that people have when they go to prison, is all the time in the world to sit down and look within themselves and to think and learn, that most people will never be able to do that in real life. I mean, I've literally been out since June 16th. So what's that, 4 months, 4.5 months? And I feel like I've been out for 3 years because how much stuff has happened, how busy I am. And I'm not even that busy. I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. and being responsible and progressing in life. And it literally feels like I've been out forever.
What do you do for work now?
I'm actually in barber school in Salem. Yeah, I might, and I've been there, I've been in barber school since August 1st. Yeah, but I just had an interview to be security at Buckle for the holidays. So just stand around and look intimidating.
Well, you were working with our homeless population for a while too.
Yeah.
That's maybe one of the other things that was really helpful, is that you had folks that you reached out to and asked for help, right? You asked me for help, you asked, one of the next days to help you get that job for help, you know, just being willing to be vulnerable and ask people for help. And to say, you know, I need to find a job, I need, you know, this resource or that resource. Who was it that helped you get the, what's the name of the organization that you're working for when you first got out in Michael?
Church at the Park.
Yeah, so Church in the Park is a day shelter, so a meal.
And that was, yeah, Des. No, I don't know what his job title is at Willamette, but yeah, so there's people out there that's willing to help. You just have to, and willing to, you know, give you a foot up out here as you come out. You just have to want it, right? I don't agree with the people that get out and it's the poor me mentality of I can't find work, I can't do this, I can't do this. Those people are just finding excuses to be a failure. Because there's, and I'm speaking on my behalf about just because there's people that have bigger issues than the normal. You see what I'm saying? I'm just talking about the normal person that has 2 legs, 2 hands, and a functional mind. They have opportunity out here and they could become something or do something. There is laws and stuff in place that I don't agree with as being an ex-offender, of course, right? That we have to deal with. But, you know, I know that if I just keep doing the right thing and I'm not doing nothing special. I'm being a normal person, doing normal stuff, making right choices. And I know if I just do that, I'm going to succeed. It's nothing extraordinary. And I don't know, like when I got out, it took so long to like slow down time and just understand how to even set up a life. Like I didn't know from doing so much time, your day is set for you from when you wake up to when you go to sleep. They tell you when to eat, when you go to work, when lights are out, everything. And then you come out to where now it's all on you. It took me a while to even understand that I need to make a schedule, stick to scheduling, figure out life, what's going to work for me, all the hurdles I have. But yeah, I chose barbering because I started doing it in prison. I kind of like it. Helps me be creative. And I just didn't want to come out and just get a job that made me miserable right away, just to have money. So, and it was close to where I live. So I chose to go to barber school. Yeah. So at OSP, anybody have questions about prison? Like what goes on in prison?
So I saw Maya first and then.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Ava.
It's kind of like, before you had mentioned that, when you had like talked to the prosecutor, you had made like health claims, addiction claims, and then they're like, there's something else going on. Do you think they made the right call and sending you the path you did and how you do it now? Or do you think that an alternative situation would have been better for you? And like, how do you do that now looking back on it in hindsight?
That's a tough question, right? Because of course, I would say an alternative method would have been better. If I could have made the perfect sentence. Did I need to do that much time? No, I absolutely didn't need to be sentenced to 10 years in prison. Maybe with a caveat or something, you know, at some point there needs to be, and this is just my opinion, there needs to be periodic checkpoints in your prison sentence to see, well, what's he doing? Who is he now to who he was? What has he done with his time? And that's measure 11 don't do that. I mean, even our earned time credits kind of does it, but not really. It's definitely not personable. It's just a system that they made. They used to have parole board hearings back before the whole system changed, right before measure 11, about the same time the mass incarceration took off. It's like the late 80s, early 90s. System.
Like Jamie, around all the other guys that they were, we would all say around 5 years felt around how long it took before they felt like they could really kind of get their lives together. You know, there's a whole range of different things, because it takes a year or two to acclimate.
Yeah.
And then a few years of just thinking and studying and, you know, going through whatever you gotta go through. And by that point, most people, at least the level of guys I work here again, 2 hands, 2 feet of fully functioning for my employees, not necessarily my clients who are serious mental illnesses. But for my employees, the guys that were just kind of normal general population, almost all of them said around 5 years, and they felt like they could go back to society. They felt like that was long enough for them to realize what they needed to do.
Yeah, and that's kind of at the 5 year. You just question, what are you there for? 5 years, you do a lot of changing, right? You get a degree in 4, 8, you know, so you do a lot of developing in 4 years. You do a lot of changing in 1 year. If you want it, like, you can progress so far in anything you put your mind to in 1 year. Next question.
Like kind of also by the correctional officers at Twin Rivers.
2 Rivers, well, over there, it's just because there are so many of them. But what are so bad about correctional is abuse of power. Having a badge and having authority intoxicates people that I don't know why. It is in the Marine Corps too. So it's the same. People get power, like in the Marine Corps, they would rank up and become like a sergeant or a corporal, and then they would abuse their power and take it out on someone they're, you know, one of their subordinates.
Give an example of like the time that you saw something like that, or
Oh yeah, they're
experienced something like that. And then also an example of maybe an officer that did the opposite.
yeah. So the first encounter I had at 2 Rivers, I moved units. This is the first really bad, absolutely, you know, unethical behavior, because there's little things they do all the time. But so I went back to the unit I just moved from to get my clothes, because it was in laundry. So your laundry goes out. I moved with my laundry out, came back, I had to go get it. So I went there and he's busy, and I'm trying to help him out, and I see laundry in the back office, in their office. And all I say is, hey, you got laundry bags out here. And he turns and screams at me. He's in a bubble, right? So there's a huge wall. They're like, we can't get to each other. And he just screams and he tells me to shut the fuck up, punk. Right? Screams at the top of his lungs is that, right? This absolutely disrespect. You know, you don't talk that way. I wasn't being rude but that's just one of them, right? That's just one, that they could talk to you a certain type of way, or they feel that way. So that was my first incident that literally made my blood boil. And I'll always remember that. But there's plenty of times they just mess with you. I've seen people get messed with. sometimes, I mean, most of the time when you get messed with, I mean, you do look at the person, you know, of course you get messed with. But sometimes when it comes to that, the way they talk to you, it should always be professional. You know, and I get it, like maybe if inmate or a AIC talks, you know, is disrespectful to them, they get in their feelings and they kind of banter at each other. But just that type of behavior is just unacceptable, what he did. And then she wanted me to, so like good stuff, there's plenty of COs that are genuine and they want to help. They want to see the system change. They have ideas, they have a voice. It's just, you know, it's just so hard to do from the bottom, you know. Let me think of an incident, or so there's someone I met in my time, and she helped me get to AIP, right? She went above and beyond to help me get there as fast as possible. She wasn't a CO though. There's plenty of times though that COs just like, even there's this one CO named Whitney, right? Sergeant Whitney. No one liked him. Just because he was a stiffler, right? He was by the book. He had a rule book in his back pocket. Just, I never really seen him disrespect someone, right? He would go out of his way to get people, bust people that were doing stuff wrong. He was never one of the types that would just disrespect someone though. But he would pull me up, like, so he gave me a job after I came out of the hole with a dirty UA, and he was known not to do that. Like, if you got a dirty UA, Whitney won't hire you. He hired me. He told me after that I could talk to him, right? He seen me as like when they pull you over at sometimes and they just talk to you, you could tell when they see you as a person and not just an inmate. And there's plenty of those guys. I had COs that were willing to like write me letters of recommendation for my commutation I was trying to do with the governor. So there's genuine people all over. It's just that when you're in the position of power and authority and you abuse it, it's just, you know, we like to put a special spotlight on it because it's just such a poison of character. Like, if you're granted that type of authority, it has to be respected, right? You have to respect the position.
Like, when the female sergeant sprayed the guy over on Delta, he was masturbating.
Probably.
So an example would be, there are very, very specific times that you are allowed to use force. And I know we talked about this before with use of force, whether it's hands, you know, verbal, hands, spray, tase, non-lethal, lethal, right? There's a fellow who was down on the tier who was masturbating a cell, which like the kind of unspoken rule is what, like 10 p.m. to 10 a.m. or something like that.
Yeah, well, hang a sheet usually sometimes, like usually that's kind of, you kind of just want to hang a sheet so no one walks by and sees you.
Yeah.
Something, right?
Yeah, it's a thing. Human beings are human beings, adults are adults, things, you know, people are human beings, and there is sort of an understanding, okay, you don't do this in the middle of the day in an open cell, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're on a tier with a female sergeant.
Yeah.
Kind of thing, right? And what happened is she had told him to stop, and I don't know if he did or not, she sprayed her. Imagine a sea spray and you're, you know. And the concern was he was in the cell. And so the risk of him actually harming her, the question then is, why are you using spray on this person? Even though what he was doing was not right, why didn't you write him up instead? Right? Or why didn't you do a verbal command and then write? Or whatever, right? Why did you spray? Why did you do this? You know, this is spray like that. Is that physically most people? You know, you have to get the person a shower right away. They have to be seen by medical. It's a whole thing. It's a whole process. And that's the only thing about it. And one of the other issues with that particular case was that that particular inmate was very well liked by other officers. And there was kind of this feeling that it had been a male CO that would not happen. And so there were all sorts of nuances to that particular use of power. But the other piece too was optics, right? CO was white and the inmate in that case was black. And they were also concerned about where this gets out. They're going to say X, Y, Z about this because of race. And there's the gender component. And there's the sexual harassment component, because obviously in the community, if somebody's doing that toward you, that's very different. But there's the whole power difference of this person's in their cell. They can't actually harm you when they're in your cell and you're working on it. And you could choose to ignore it, right? So that would be an example I think of, I mean, a misuse of physical force. And there have been other instances where you might think of some misuse of physical force, where you know, they're walking somebody out who's not in a fight, and so they just slash them on the back of the head because they can, and nobody says a word. So there are lots of different ways that power can be used. The power can also be used for good, right? Let's say that you're a sergeant who has a little more pull, and you really want to help out particular people because maybe they worked for you before, or maybe you just know that they're really, really trying, and you do have that pull, and you can make recommendations, right? And you can kind of use your discretion that way and say, you know, hey, I think so-and-so is a really good fit for this program. Can we get him in there, even though he might be in a pile of, you know, applicants. There's a lot of kind of relational, you know, the officers that you can choose to align yourself with and form those relationships with, not just the officers, but the health staff, all that kind of stuff, right? Yeah, the staff that help you with your job. They were activities or something, right?
The one I was just mentioning?
Yeah.
No, so that was actually from the Inspector General's office.
Okay,
Yeah.
so she was outside the actual.
Yeah,
Okay.
she went above and beyond to get me to AIP as soon as possible, as soon as my window opened and all that.
Was part of that reason the Barton case?
I don't know, Barton case.
Our fellow that they sent back into the whole board?
No,
Okay.
no.
We're gonna follow Diane here, and the other guy that was gonna be here tonight, was punished pretty
Yeah,
extensively for speaking up about it.
Yeah.
And ended up getting released early by the governor because of that.
yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of political stuff. I was violated by a CO as a man too, that was giving me a tap or a pat down. And just violated me, touching me. And just knew that he could and knew I couldn't do nothing about it. And like to put like the exclamation up point on to know how I was being violated was he grabbed my belt at the end, right? And just like shoved me around after he touched me all over. But in places you don't need to touch on a simple pat down. Anyways, there's a certain way they're supposed to pat you down. And then there's a way he did it. And just everything about that situation, I knew I got violated, right? And that he crossed the line on purpose for whatever reason he had. But that happened to me too. Hey, well, who else had questions?
Is there any big myths about prison that you either see in media or hear from word of mouth that you either want to dispel or like get some more light to?
Yeah, there's all types of myths.
Talk about the gang myths, that one's.
So yeah, and that's pretty much what I was about to get, that like it's not as violent as the TV makes it seem, right? There is violence, right? That's gonna happen. It's always gonna happen in those environments. But yeah, and then like gangs aren't in Oregon. I can't speak on other places. I've never been there, right? But I would suspect that it's the same way everywhere, right? Of course, there are people that are absolutely crazy and absolutely live for the letters on their neck or for criminal behavior. They will die for it because that's just a core belief they have. But most of the time, guys, it's literally they're humans, and it's not that bad, right? But then it,
Understanding, so like there are times we talk about like out in the yard, where like leaders of different gangs would meet, like heads of the mob meeting and basically saying, how are we gonna deal with the situation, right? That kind
Yeah,
of thing.
so there's politics in prison. There's shot callers because you have certain gangs and you have the guys that run those gangs at that prison and the whole interconnection of everything, right? Gangs run prison. Don't get me wrong. I didn't run prison as a white non-gang member. I fell in line with what they had. You have to sit in the right place, act a certain way, you know, that type of stuff. But yeah, so gangs are real, right? It's like, maybe I'm just desensitized to it. I just like, I know like on TV, they put the perception of just like how horrible and violent it is. And it is, right? It's a horrible place. It is violent. But they're human, right? But yeah, just say their politics happen in prison. There's so many incidences. Just say this colored person, say a black person got jumped by 2 white people in laundry. Why? It doesn't matter why. They want to know why 2 white people beat up a black person. That is going to cause the yard to literally, they're going to figure out what happened. And anytime something like that, someone's paying a price, right? Because those white people should have known, 1, it's a different race, and 2, it was a 2-on-1, which is like a no-go unless it's authorized. You can't just beat people up in prison without repercussions. It's always a political thing going on. You can't just fight. There are mutual fights that happen, but there's always a bigger scheme to everything. Jumped?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna. You'll be lucky at OSP. You'll be lucky not to have a fight one day. You know, something happened. I mean, there's definitely going to be a fight. And that's the thing, is it might not get caught, right? It might just be a cell fight, a mutual cell fight. But yeah, a fight is going to happen almost every day. I would say something.
I don't know if that's the same as getting jumped though. Like when we talk about people getting jumped, that's usually sort of in the lingo, it's more of a planned assault.
Is that what you're trying to say? Is someone? So someone that gets jumped is either going to be someone that owes a gang drug debts, gambling debts, someone that they're Xing out of their gang because he ended up telling and they found out about it, or violated some type of ethical code that they have. Those are the people that get jumped and get hurt really bad. Are always those type of incidences.
What are some of the ethical codes that kind of among the inmates, right? Not between the inmates, but among the inmates, what are some of the sort of unspoken rules that they are trying to follow?
Can't talk to sex offenders. Got to sit with me as a white person. Got to sit on the white side. Once I did tons of time and I knew everybody, right? I got a lot of leniency, right? People they knew me and knew I wasn't in anything, right? So I got along with everybody. But sit on the white side, be respectful. There's a way, I mean, it's just, and it kind of varies from different prison too, also. Some prisons are very hard on people like, with female staff, right? They don't even, or even staff in general, but female staff, they don't want to hear you ever flirt with female staff, right? The white car. And then you can't even talk to staff alone. Always have to have someone there with you if you're talking to staff. Workout cars, you're not supposed to work out with different races. A lot of politics fall into race lines. Because I mean, the whites are mostly white national gangs in Oregon. They're this like the IPSs Insane Picklewood Syndicate, a bunch of white nationalist gangs. So
What happens to folks that say are disrespectful towards female staff or folks that are assault female staff?
yeah, they get jumped. Yeah, so yeah, yes. Because they consider that kind of sex offender behavior. Like if you go around and you touch female staff, flirt with them.
So sex offenders get treated just like on TV, just like, you know, a lot.
Yes, that's not a myth. Sex offenders absolutely get treated worse than human, right? They're not treated well. At OSP, they kind of get some leniency at like 2 Rivers on certain units. You're not even leaving your cell. Like they do give them time they get to come eat chow. They get to use the phone 1 time a day at like 1 o'clock and then shower at the same time. But that's it. They don't get anything else.
And this is enforced by the other.
Yeah, but usually the gang members are the ones that create these rules, right? And then you have a bunch of usually white people that aren't gang members that they have to have this code and uphold it. I mean, they're literally tools for the white gang members. Yeah, go ahead.
Were you ever like approached by the white gangs to like come join?
Yes. Oh yeah. Especially my first couple years. It's not all, and it's never, hey, I want you to join it's come work out with me. Try to befriend you. You want to work out? And they just try to lead you to just hang out with them. And that's how it usually starts. Most people come in prison, they decide they have a desire to want that because that's the popular thing to do. Like if you go into prison, you join a gang, you get the power, you get the cool seats, you get to look like the cool kids and all, you know, it's a high school thing. So I was never attracted to it because I made up my mind from the beginning what type of time I was going to do. But that's why kids coming in young that are very naive, right, impressionable, they get sucked right into that stuff.
Well, I think part of it is also the promise of protection, right? Like if you had been, you know, a 5'8" sort of more feminine looking person, that might have been different.
True.
You know,
And someone that is afraid, like because they know they can't defend themselves that well. Yeah, I mean, there's people that fall into sexual activity to get protection because they're bisexual, so they'll you know end up in certain situations just because they're bisexual and they need protection.
Or you're not bisexual and to be able temporarily.
Yeah.
So you're saying that you kind of like you ended up knowing most of the people in there.
Yeah.
Did you see it? Was it seen a lot throughout the prison that there were many titles on people that kind of like, oh, this guy did this, or you know, did you see those titles?
Yeah, like
instead of knowing their name, you knew like what they
did. Yeah, if you had a sex offense, people you can't talk to them. So sex offenders and rats, snitches, or like those two are just gonna get treated the worst out of everybody in prison. They're titled, they're known for the most part, I guess. Yeah.
What about the folks in special housing, like the folks that you work with? So the guys that were my clients that were mentally ill or IDT or elderly.
Yeah. Look, same. They're looked down upon. They're mistreated by staff even sometimes. Just coming from a place of misunderstanding and no compassion. But yeah, they're literally, her clients were all sex offenders to GP, right? They just sex offenders, rats, and dropouts. That's literally what they were classified as. And for me to even take that job and to do what I did, right? They looked at me like a lame or whatever, right? So that's the title I would probably get at the beginning, but people got to know me and just knew that I was who I am, right?
Did
And
you notice anything about most of the people that we had to be your companions for the disabled guys?
yeah,
Okay, what did you notice?
they're just compassionate people, people that didn't really care what other people, they weren't involved in the politics. If they were, it was in the past. But someone just people that have an understanding and a sense of compassion and empathy for people and weren't involved in the everyday prison stuff, as in what's the right word for it?
Say that's true for like the Ron, the JV, and like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, as in, I know they still were in some type of politics, but not really. They weren't like heavy into. I mean, Tehran. I mean, he got in a fight. So
Yeah, we try to, as staff, we want to be strategic, right? You're not gonna put two men in a cell together that you know are from rival gangs, right? You're not gonna do things like that. And part of what we did for hiring was finding people like Bobby that we knew weren't affiliated and had some respect. And some of it does come down to things like physical stature, right? Okay, like, if you screw with this guy, he would be a great fit for this because not only does he have the compassion and the willingness to work with these guys with disabilities, but no one's gonna screw with them if they're standing next to this guy on the yard, right? And sometimes we would use those politics to that advantage. We might hire somebody that's a little higher up in the gangs, or that we know is respected.
Yeah.
They are respected out in the wake, are respected out in the chow hall, because you have to kind of look at those politics. And so when you have, what, 3,000 people to house, you have to think about all those things when you're deciding where to house them, who to house them with, whether it's going to be safe, whether they're going to be safe, because your job is to keep them safe, right? And so that's a big piece of it, is not only can you hire people that are most qualified in terms of their skills, you also have to hire them based on those things. How did you get into barbershop? I'm really curious about that, because the barbershop is very political.
So I was working on the what was the job title?
Because you were down the hall from them, we were down the hall from the barbershop, and they got to know us pretty well.
Yeah, I never worked in that barbershop though upstairs.
Okay.
I just worked in E block.
Okay.
But a job opening came open and I knew the sergeant there very well.
Who was it then?
I forget. Polk, Sergeant Polk. And I just went to him and asked to be hired and to get hired, and he said, yeah, you have to be trained. I wasn't even a level. I was supposed to go up to group living to where she's talking about the barbershop and get trained by them. But he finagled it to where I was just getting trained by the barber on the unit. And so I started cutting hair there and learned how to cut hair. All right. I was never really good compared to what I am now, but yeah. But it was a start at the start. Any other questions?
Obviously, like someone who killed a kid probably is gonna be on the same level as like sex offender in terms of undesirable, what are murderers normally treated like, or like there's a tier system, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. So definitely if it's you touch kids or hurt kids, it falls kind of under the same. But there's people with heinous crimes that walk around and ain't bugged, it's just all politics.
A lot of it is if you have crimes where you have life or previously death row, people tend not to mess with you because you don't have the same repercussions. You don't have to worry about losing good time, right? You don't have to worry about losing program, right? All of those things. And so the lifers have a lot of.
Yeah. But yeah, anything to do with kids is looked down upon in prison.
What was it like to visit with your daughter?
It's just something I had to deal with. definitely couldn't be a present father, obviously, so it's weird. She grew up with me in prison and in visiting rooms. Oh, you know, there's so many times where we just play and a CO would come in and say, sorry, can't do that, right? Have her on my shoulders or something, or just be doing something. You know, so there's this, it's just not right. It's not right at all. And that's not even, it's not about me, it's about her, right? And that's another thing that's never thought about in our criminal justice system is kids, people with kids, and how it's going to affect them when you incarcerate them. And definitely need more family programs, more humaneness there, especially with kids. Like, who knows the trauma my daughter has? I'm blessed because she hasn't exhibited anything like that yet. But there's I'm sure there's something there, but she also didn't go through having me then losing me, right? Like you guys, like 5 and 10, having your father for that time and then it being pulled away. She grew up and that was for her normal. So I would say it's less traumatic in the sense, just like the way I grew up, right? Poverty and drug addiction all around, but it was normal. I didn't know what normal was. So that was just, so I didn't have that traumatic effect of just like when your parents get ripped away and incarcerated after having them for years and having to deal with, you know what I mean? Someone gets incarcerated, a man nowadays, say you're married and then the guy goes to prison or the woman does, you lose that income, you lose all that. And then that partner's there to fend for themselves. And there's so much trauma, so much drama. Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely not a good place to raise your kids. I mean, she had to come in and see me in the blue jeans and blue shirt and prison and had to live with that. So that's, you know.
So just like a couple minutes, is there anything else?
What's one thing you wish everyone could know about the criminal justice system that isn't like talked about enough? Or I know you mentioned like a lot of little things, but what's one of the things that you wish was more like out there, that was more like talked about or conveyed?
To pinpoint one thing is this, I would just say this to sum everything up. Because the systems, right? We have these systems in place for society to function. There's a lot of things we need to look at in the criminal justice system, just by the statistics she was showing you earlier, right? We're the most incarcerated country ever in the history of the world. And then like you could take every country exists right now and put them all together. They still don't have the amount of inmates that we have right now. There's a reason for that, right? It don't just happen. There's definitely ill intent behind some stuff. And those issues need to be addressed. You're ruining lives generationally because it's passed on. And instead of bettering people, our systems or the criminal justice system isn't bettering no one. If someone comes out better than what they went in, that's because they chose to. Ultimately, that's the way it's always going to be, but we could make the environment to where it's easier to choose that, right? The people and the powers to be create the environment. I just know they can. The funding, they could change it, and they always want to blame just like, you know, time. Well, time, I mean, you have to make the change first, and then we'll see if the change actually works through time. Not just keep giving me time to wait for the change. Give me the change and then see if it works with time. But yeah, that's what I would just say. there's not one little thing, because you could go from pre-trial to trial to prison to post-prison. There's stuff that needs to be looked at and all that. Sentencing is a big one in Oregon. And then while you're incarcerated, there's a million of them, right? Just little things that just need to be looked at. How can we make it better for the children of incarcerated people to be able to have a father-daughter relationship or a mother-daughter, mother-son relationship, all that, right? I mean, do we really have to put 2 full-grown humans inside of a 8x10 box, right? Is that inhumane with the toilet just exposed? And like, this is archaic. Like, our criminal justice system is old. It needs to be revolutionized, right? And for people that just think that what it is just the way it always should be, and this punish and this, that, and it's just, it don't work. Hasn't worked. And there's a million things we can do about it. To say there's nothing we can do about it's just a lie, and it's just people have their hands in pockets somewhere, and yeah. Well, that's what I would say. Yeah. And just know that one wrong choice can get you there. So make good choices. Don't violate, seriously, don't violate the state. The state is powerful. Yeah, don't try to go get food stamps when you don't need them. All that, right? When you start stealing money from the state, they're going to come after you. I just said the reason why that was in my head is I know someone that just got charged with, they were getting food stamps for years, lying to the state about their income and all that. Well, they just got a felony, and they're just had to pay back $30,000 and just wreck their life. And they're pretty, normal people. They have jobs. You would never know, right? But so things can happen to the best of people. It's just making wrong choices. And yeah, it was pretty crazy to watch someone go through the justice system that I was kind of close with, right? They thought their life was going to end. They serious, because don't give the state an opportunity to play with your life at all. And I know you guys are doing good, and George Fox, you guys have made some right choices to get where you're at, and just keep going that route, and find something you guys are passionate about, something you guys love, and also find issues, political issues, things that need to be changed, and, fight for those things too. This is our country, right? We run it, we vote. So. I hope that helps.
All right, Sarah and Colby, I will have the recording posted up later. Thanks for being here. Hope you all feel better.
Thank you.
Yeah,